The Princess and the Frog is a 2009 American animated fantasy comedy musical film produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and released by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. Now, before we even get into the story, it is important to understand where this movie comes from and why it matters so much in the history of Disney animation. The film is the 49th feature in the Walt Disney Animated Classic series, and it is loosely based on the novel The Frog Princess by E.D. Baker, which is in turn based on the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, The Frog Prince. So the foundation of this story goes all the way back to an 1812 German fairy tale, then reimagined in a modern novel in 2002, and then taken by Disney and turned into something truly special and culturally significant. The film was directed by John Musker and Ron Clements, and written by Clements, Musker, and Rob Edwards. Now, these two directors are not strangers to Disney greatness. They are the same duo responsible for some of the most iconic Disney films ever made, including The Great Mouse Detective in 1986, The Little Mermaid in 1989, Aladdin in 1992, Hercules in 1997, and Treasure Planet in 2002. So when these two men returned to Disney to make The Princess and the Frog, audiences and fans had every reason to be excited. One of the most historically important things about this film is the fact that it marked a major moment in Disney animation history. It marked Disney's return to traditional hand-drawn animation, as it was the studio's first traditionally animated film since Home on the Range in 2004. For several years, Disney had been moving away from hand-drawn animation in favor of computer-generated imagery. The Princess and the Frog brought back the classic style, the beautiful hand-drawn frames, and the fluid artistic expression that defined the Disney Renaissance of the 1990s. The music for the film was composed and conducted by Randy Newman, who is well known for his legendary musical work on Pixar's Toy Story franchise. The studio returned to a Broadway musical-style format, which had been a defining feature of Disney's most celebrated animated films. The result was a rich, soulful, jazz-infused soundtrack that perfectly matched the energy and spirit of the story's New Orleans setting. The film is set in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the 1920s, making it one of the very few Disney animated films to be rooted in a real American city with a specific historical time period. This gave the film a completely unique visual identity, filled with jazz music, bayou landscapes, Mardi Gras culture, and the vibrant spirit of the American South. Now let us get into the full story of the film. The story begins in New Orleans in the year 1926. We are introduced to a young African-American woman named Tiana, who works 2 waitress jobs simultaneously just to save enough money to fulfill her lifelong dream of opening her own restaurant. This dream was inherited from her late father, James, who always believed in the power of hard work combined with wishing on a star. Tiana is disciplined, focused, and driven, but her dedication to work leaves her with almost no social life. Her best friend is a wealthy young woman named Charlotte LaBeouf, the daughter of the richest man in New Orleans, known affectionately as Big Daddy. Charlotte is the opposite of Tiana in many ways. She is carefree, romantic, and obsessed with fairy tales and the idea of marrying a prince. The two women have been friends since childhood, and their bond is genuine despite their very different lives and circumstances. Meanwhile, a young and arrogant prince named Naveen arrives in New Orleans from the fictional kingdom of Maldonia. Naveen is charming and carefree, but his parents have cut him off from the family fortune because of his irresponsible lifestyle. He arrives in New Orleans with plans to marry a wealthy woman to restore his financial security, and Charlotte LaBeouf becomes his target. Big Daddy hosts a grand masquerade ball in Prince Naveen's honor, and Charlotte hires Tiana to prepare beignets for the event, paying her generously. For Tiana, This payment is one step closer to finally purchasing the old mill she dreams of converting into her restaurant. However, before Naveen can meet Charlotte at the ball, he and his valet Lawrence cross paths with a sinister figure known as Dr. Facilier, also called the Shadow Man. Facilier is an evil voodoo witch doctor who has ambitions of taking control of New Orleans and its wealth. He is manipulative and charming on the surface but deeply dangerous underneath. Using dark voodoo magic, Facilier transforms Prince Naveen into a frog and uses a voodoo talisman containing Naveen's blood to transform Lawrence into a physical doppelganger of the prince. His plan is for Lawrence, disguised as Naveen, to marry Charlotte, and then use a voodoo doll to kill Big Daddy and claim his fortune for Facilier himself. At the ball, Tiana discovers she has been outbid for the old mill she was saving to purchase, and in her despair she accidentally spills food on her outfit. Charlotte kindly lends her a beautiful princess costume. Feeling heartbroken and hopeless, Tiana steps outside and begins wishing upon a star when she suddenly encounters a small frog. The frog speaks to her. It is Prince Naveen in his cursed form. Naveen, seeing Tiana dressed in her princess costume, mistakes her for an actual princess and begs her to kiss him, believing her kiss will break the voodoo spell. He promises her a financial reward in return. Tiana reluctantly agrees to help restore her restaurant dream, but the moment she kisses Naveen, the magic backfires. Instead of turning Naveen back into a human, Tiana herself is transformed into a frog. The two frogs are chased out of the ball and find themselves in the swamps and bayous outside New Orleans. Here they encounter a jazz-loving anthropomorphic alligator named Louis, who dreams of playing his trumpet on stage with human musicians. When Tiana and Naveen explain their situation to Louis, he points them toward a powerful and wise voodoo practitioner named Mama Odie, who lives deep in the bayou and may be able to break the curse. On their journey through the bayou, the group is joined by a warm-hearted Cajun firefly named Ray, who serves as their guide and offers them friendship and loyalty throughout their travels. Ray is in love with a star he calls Evangeline, whom he believes is a firefly like himself. His romantic devotion to that distant light becomes one of the most emotionally touching elements of the film. During the journey, Tiana and Naveen slowly begin developing genuine feelings for each other. Naveen, through his experiences as a frog struggling to survive in the bayou, begins to grow as a person. He learns responsibility, selflessness, and what it truly means to care for someone other than himself. Tiana, in turn, begins to understand that life is about more than working endlessly and that love and joy are also part of a meaningful life. Back in New Orleans, Facilier realizes his talisman is running low on Naveen's blood, which is the power source keeping Lawrence in Naveen's form. He makes a dark deal with his spiritual allies, referred to as his friends on the other side, offering them the souls of the entire city's population in exchange for an army of shadow demons to track down the real Naveen and return him to Facilier. When the group finally reaches Mama Odie, they discover she is a blind, elderly, eccentric but deeply wise voodoo priestess who lives in a boat perched high in a tree. She clarifies the terms of the curse and tells Naveen that the only way for the spell to be broken is for him to kiss a real princess. The window of opportunity is narrow. It must happen before midnight on Mardi Gras night, while Charlotte LaBeouf is still technically a princess, having been crowned Mardi Gras princess for that one evening. The group races back to New Orleans just in time for the Mardi Gras celebration. However, Facilier's shadow demons capture Naveen before he can reach Charlotte. Lawrence, still disguised as Naveen, is on the verge of marrying Charlotte. In a courageous act, Ray steals the talisman from Lawrence, disrupting the spell and exposing Lawrence for who he really is. Lawrence is arrested. But Facilier, furious and desperate, confronts Tiana directly. He tempts her with a vision of the restaurant, and everything she has ever dreamed of, attempting to make her surrender the talisman. In a powerful moment of self-realization, Tiana understands that some things matter more than her ambitions. She destroys the talisman. With his deal broken, Facilier is dragged away into the spirit world by his own dark allies, meeting a terrifying end. After all of this, Naveen is freed. He confesses his love for Tiana and chooses her over the wealthy marriage he originally planned. Charlotte, moved by their love story, agrees to kiss Naveen to break the curse. But by this point, midnight has already struck, and Charlotte is no longer a princess. The kiss does not work, and Tiana and Naveen remain as frogs. In the aftermath, Ray, who was fatally injured by Facilier during the chaos, passes away peacefully. In a beautiful and emotional scene, Ray's love for his star Evangeline is honored when he himself becomes a new star in the sky, shining beside Evangeline forever. Tiana and Naveen, accepting their fate as frogs, are married by Mama Od in the bayou. The moment they share their first kiss as husband and wife, the spell is finally broken. Because Tiana has now married a prince, she herself becomes a princess, and the curse lifts, turning them both back into humans. They return to New Orleans, finalize their wedding in celebration, and together they open Tiana's restaurant, the dream that began with her father, now finally made real. Now let us talk about the incredible voice cast that brought these characters to life. Anika Noni Rose voiced Tiana, the film's lead character. Rose is an acclaimed actress and stage performer, best known at the time for her role in the 2006 musical drama film Dreamgirls. Her portrayal of Tiana was celebrated for being warm, strong, and deeply human. Bruno Campos voiced Prince Naveen, the charming and initially irresponsible prince from Maldonia. Campos brought a playful and eventually heartfelt quality to the role that made Naveen one of the more genuinely developed love interests in Disney's animated catalog. Keith David voiced the villain Dr. Facilier, also known as the Shadow Man. Keith David is a legendary voice actor and film performer whose deep, commanding voice made Facilier one of the most memorable Disney villains ever created. Michael Leon Woolley voiced Louis the Alligator, the jazz-loving swamp creature who joins Tiana and Naveen on their journey. Woolley brought tremendous energy and comedy to the role. Jim Cummings voiced Ray the Firefly, the lovable Cajun guide of the group. Cummings is one of the most prolific voice actors in animation history, known for voicing characters like Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. Jennifer Cody voiced Charlotte LaBeouf, Tiana's wealthy best friend. Charlotte is written and performed as a comedic character, but one with genuine kindness at her core. Oprah Winfrey voiced Eudora, Tiana's loving and supportive mother. Having Oprah Winfrey in the cast was a significant cultural moment for the film. Terrence Howard voiced Tiana's father James, whose dream of opening a restaurant inspired everything Tiana works toward throughout her life. John Goodman voiced Big Daddy LaBeouf, Charlotte's kind and generous father, one of the wealthiest men in New Orleans. Peter Bartlett voiced Lawrence, Prince Naveen's valet who is manipulated by Facilier into becoming the villain's instrument of deception. Jennifer Lewis voiced Mama Od, the wise and eccentric voodoo priestess of the bayou. Release date and box office. The Princess and the Frog had a staged release. The film premiered at the Walt Disney Animation Studios lot in Burbank, California on November 15, 2009. It then opened in limited release in New York City and Los Angeles on November 25, 2009. And went into full-wide release across the United States on December 11, 2009. The film was originally planned for a Christmas Day release, but that date was changed because of competition from the family film Alvin and the Chipmunks, the sequel, which was scheduled to release on the same day. Disney moved The Princess and the Frog to December 11 to avoid a direct box office collision. The film had a production budget of approximately $105 million. It grossed over $104 million in the United States and Canada alone, and over $267 million worldwide, making it a solid box office success and the fifth highest grossing animated film of 2009. It ranked number 1 at the North American box office on its opening weekend, which was a strong commercial statement for a traditionally animated film in an era dominated by computer animation. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray in North America on March 16, 2010. Awards and RECOGNITIO and The Princess and the Frog received 3 Academy Award nominations at the 82nd Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Animated Feature and received 2 nominations for Best Original Song. While it did not win in either category, losing Best Animated Feature to Up and Best Original Song to Crazy Heart, the nominations themselves were a recognition of the film's quality and cultural impact. Trailer info: the first teaser trailer for The Princess and the Frog was released on July 30, 2008, more than a year before the film hit theaters. The trailer immediately generated massive excitement among Disney fans and animation enthusiasts because it confirmed that Disney was returning to hand-drawn traditional animation after years away from the format. The trailer highlighted the vibrant New Orleans setting, the jazz-infused music, and introduced audiences to Tiana and Naveen for the first time. Why this film matters: The Princess and the Frog holds a very special place in Disney's history and in popular culture. It introduced Tiana, who became Disney's first African-American princess, a milestone that carried enormous cultural significance. The film was set in New Orleans, drawing on the rich traditions of jazz music, Creole culture, Louisiana cuisine, and the unique spirit of one of America's most historically vibrant cities. It treated its cultural setting with care and creativity, and it gave audiences a heroine who was defined not just by her dreams but by her work ethic, her intelligence, and her love. The film also represented a genuine artistic statement from Disney, a declaration that hand-drawn animation was still worthy, still beautiful, and still capable of telling stories that connect with audiences of all ages. That is everything you need to know about The Princess and the Frog from 2009. A film rooted in fairy tale tradition, brought to life through the magic of hand-drawn animation, set in the soulful city of New Orleans, and powered by one of the most memorable casts Disney has ever assembled. It is a story about hard work, love, sacrifice, and the understanding that the things we wish for are only truly earned when we are willing to grow as human beings. The beginning, Tiana's world and her dream. The story of The Princess and the Frog begins in the vibrant, colorful, and music-filled city of New Orleans, Louisiana, in the year 1926. The city itself is almost a character in this film. Its streets are alive with jazz music, its culture is rich with Creole traditions, and its people carry a warmth and energy that is completely unique to that part of the world. We are introduced to a young girl named Tiana. She is a small child at the beginning of the story, and we first see her in the home of the wealthy LaBeouf family, where her mother Eudora works as a seamstress. Eudora is crafting a beautiful dress for the LaBeouf family's daughter, a little girl named Charlotte, who is commonly called Lottie. Charlotte is a dreamer in every sense of the word. She loves fairy tales, she loves romance, and more than anything else in the world, she wants to one day marry a prince. She is not a bad child. In fact, she is generous and genuine, but she is wrapped up entirely in the fantasy of a perfect, magical life. While Eudora finishes the dress, she reads both girls the classic fairy tale of the Frog Prince, a story about a prince who is turned into a frog and can only be freed by the kiss of a princess. Charlotte is absolutely enchanted by the story and declares that she would kiss 100 frogs if it meant finding her prince. Young Tiana, on the other hand, pulls a face of disgust and says she would never kiss a frog for anything in the world. This small, seemingly simple moment at the very beginning of the film is in fact the setup for everything that follows. Later that evening, Tiana's father James comes home from work. He is a hardworking man with a heart full of love for his family. Tiana shows him the gumbo she has been practicing to cook, and James tastes it and declares it the finest thing he has ever eaten. James has a dream of his own. He wants to one day open a restaurant, a place where people can come together, share food, laugh, and feel at home. He and Tiana look out the window together at the evening star shining brightly in the sky, and he tells her that you can wish on that star all you want, but wishes alone do not make dreams come true. Hard work, he tells her, is what gets you there. He calls it the secret ingredient. It is a life lesson that Tiana absorbs completely, and it becomes the foundation of everything she does for the rest of her life. This is the last truly peaceful moment Tiana has with her father. Time passes, and we learn that James later died, likely during World War I, never having had the chance to open his restaurant. His death does not break Tiana. Instead, it strengthens her resolve. She makes a silent promise to herself and to her father's memory that she will open that restaurant. She will do it for him. She will make his dream real. Tiana is a young woman, the waitress with a mission. By the time the main story takes place, Tiana is a young adult woman. She is working not one but two waitress jobs simultaneously, putting in exhausting hours every single day and saving every penny she earns. She has no social life. She attends no parties, she goes on no dates, she allows herself no rest. Every moment of her day is dedicated to her goal. She keeps a jar at home where she stores her savings, and every coin she adds brings her one small step closer to the restaurant she has been dreaming of for her entire life. Her mother Eudora loves her dearly but worries about her. Eudora sees a daughter who is brilliant and hardworking but who has closed herself off from the joys of life, from friendship, from love, from simply enjoying the world around her. She gently encourages Tiana to slow down and let life in, but Tiana is too focused to hear it. She has her father's voice in her head, telling her to work hard, and that is what she does. Tiana's best friend Charlotte LaBeouf, now a young woman herself, is still exactly as she was as a child, joyful, romantic, and completely obsessed with the idea of finding a prince and living a fairy tale life. Charlotte is rich beyond imagination, thanks to her father Big Daddy, who is one of the wealthiest and most beloved men in all of New Orleans. Charlotte adores Tiana, and the two women share a bond of genuine friendship despite having completely different personalities and living completely different lives. There is an old sugar mill in New Orleans that is available for purchase, and Tiana has had her eye on it for years. It is the perfect location for her restaurant. The building needs work, but she can see exactly what it could become: a beautiful, warm, welcoming place filled with music and the smell of incredible food, the kind of place her father always dreamed of. She is very close to having enough money saved to make an offer on the property, and real estate developers have confirmed to her that if she can bring them the required funds, the mill is hers. Everything in Tiana's life at this point is moving toward that one goal. She is disciplined, she is focused, and she is almost there. Prince Naveen arrives in New Orleans at the same time. A very different kind of person is making his way to New Orleans. Prince Naveen is the crown prince of a small and fictional kingdom called Maldonia. He is young, handsome, carefree, and almost completely irresponsible. He loves music, he loves dancing, he loves adventure, and he loves the attention that comes with being royalty. He has spent his entire life enjoying every luxury imaginable without ever working a single day or taking a single thing seriously. His parents, the King and Queen of Maldonia, have finally had enough of his behavior. They have cut him off completely from the family fortune. Naveen arrives in New Orleans with essentially nothing, accompanied only by his valet Lawrence. Lawrence is a short, round, somewhat bitter man who has spent years tolerating Naveen's selfishness and carelessness, and he is deeply resentful of it, though he keeps his feelings carefully hidden. Naveen's plan is simple and practical in the most unromantic way possible. He needs money, and the fastest way to get it, in his mind, is to marry a wealthy woman. He has heard about the LaBeouf family's fortune and about Charlotte LaBeouf specifically, and he intends to charm her into marriage. This is not a love story in the making for him, it is a transaction. He needs her wealth, and she has always wanted a prince. In his mind, it is a perfect arrangement. Naveen is not a villain. He is shallow and selfish, but he is not cruel. There is something genuine buried beneath all of his carelessness, something that has simply never been challenged or called forward because his privileged life has never required anything of him. He does not know how to cook, he does not know how to take care of himself, and he cannot do anything practical. He has always had people to do everything for him, but all of that is about to change dramatically. Dr. Facilier. The Shadow in New Orleans in the 1920s is a city of music, food, culture, and also shadow. On the edges of the city's vibrant life, there is a figure known as Dr. Facilier, or more commonly by his nickname, the Shadow Man. Facilier runs a small voodoo shop on the streets of New Orleans, where he reads fortunes and offers deals to those who are desperate or greedy enough to accept them. He is elegant, charming, and dangerous. He speaks in a smooth, theatrical voice and has an almost hypnotic quality about him. His tall hat, long coat, and ever-present shadow make him one of the most visually striking figures in the entire story. But Facilier is more than just a street-level con man. He has made a dark and binding deal with a group of supernatural spirits he calls his friends on the other side. These spirits are essentially voodoo demons, powerful and hungry, and Facilier has borrowed their power in exchange for a debt he has not yet repaid. He owes them souls, thousands of them, and he has been scheming for a long time to find a way to deliver on that promise and claim total power over New Orleans for himself. When Naveen and Lawrence wander into Facilier's territory, he immediately recognizes an opportunity. He reads both their fortunes with eerie accuracy. He tells Naveen he is broke and needs money, and he tells Lawrence that deep down, he has always wanted to be in charge for once. Both things are completely true, and Facilier uses that truth to reel them both in. He invites them into his shop and performs a voodoo ritual. With dark magic and a twisted smile, he transforms Prince Naveen into a small green frog. Then he creates a magical talisman, a small amulet that contains a few drops of Naveen's blood, and uses it to transform Lawrence into a perfect physical copy of Prince Naveen. Lawrence now looks exactly like the prince, and no one can tell the difference. Facilier's plan is now in motion. Lawrence, disguised as Naveen, will attend the masquerade ball at the LaBeouf mansion, charm Charlotte into agreeing to marry him, and once the marriage is secured, Facilier will use a voodoo doll to kill Big Daddy. With Big Daddy dead, Charlotte will inherit his vast fortune, and as her husband, Lawrence will control it, with Facilier taking his cut. The souls of New Orleans' wealthy population will then be delivered to the spirits on the other side, paying off Facilier's debt and giving him the power he has always craved. It is a detailed, calculated, and deeply sinister plan. The only thing required to keep it working is for the real Naveen, now a frog, to stay hidden and never be found. The kiss that changes everything. The night of the masquerade ball arrives. The LaBeouf mansion is filled with music, lights, food, and celebration. Charlotte is radiant, floating through the party in her finest dress, hoping that tonight is the night she finally meets her prince. Tiana has been hired to provide beignets for the party, and she has spent the whole day cooking, preparing hundreds of the delicious fried pastries to serve to the guests. Charlotte paid her generously for the work, and that payment was going to be the final amount Tiana needed to make her offer on the old sugar mill. But at the party, Tiana learns devastating news. She approaches the real estate developers and discovers that she has been outbid on the mill. 2 other potential buyers have offered more money, and if Tiana cannot match their price, the property will go to someone else. Everything she has worked for, every sacrifice she has made, every hour she has spent on her feet at those 2 waitress jobs, all of it is not enough. The restaurant, her father's dream, the thing that has kept her going through every difficult moment of her life, it is slipping away. In her distress, she accidentally spills food on her outfit. Charlotte, being the generous friend she is, immediately offers Tiana one of her spare dresses, a beautiful princess costume from her collection. Tiana puts it on, and in the glow of the party lights, she looks unmistakably like a princess. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, Tiana steps away from the party onto a quiet balcony. She looks up at the evening star, the same star her father used to point out to her when she was a child. She begins to make a wish, the way he always told her to, but her grief is too heavy for any star to carry. It is at this moment that a small green frog hops out of the shadows and speaks to her. The frog introduces himself as Prince Naveen of Maldonia. He is charming even in his frog form, and he quickly explains to Tiana that he has been transformed by dark magic and needs her to kiss him to break the curse. Seeing her dressed in a princess costume, he has mistaken her for an actual princess. He tells her that if she kisses him, he will reward her financially, exactly the kind of money she needs to save her restaurant. Tiana is a practical woman and deeply resistant to anything that sounds like magical nonsense. She is skeptical, she is uncomfortable, and the idea of kissing a frog is precisely as unpleasant to her as it was when she was a little girl listening to fairy tales. But the thought of losing her restaurant makes her desperate enough to try almost anything. She holds the frog up, closes her eyes, and kisses him. For one brief hopeful moment, it seems like it might work. There is a flash of magic. But instead of Naveen transforming back into a human, Tiana herself transforms into a frog. The kiss did not break the spell because Tiana is not a real princess. She was wearing a costume, not a crown. The magic had no princess to draw power from, and so it simply extended the curse to the person who administered it. Suddenly both Tiana and Naveen are frogs, and the ballroom is descending into panic and chaos. Charlotte's large dog spots them and begins chasing them through the party. The 2 frogs flee the mansion together and launch themselves off the balcony, eventually landing in a nearby tree and then tumbling down into the streets below. They bicker immediately. Naveen is infuriating to Tiana because she blames him entirely for what happened, and Naveen finds Tiana impossibly uptight and humorless. They are incompatible in almost every way, thrown together by a shared disaster and a shared need. They are now both frogs in the bayous and swamps outside New Orleans, and they have to figure out how to fix this. Into the bayou, Louis and Ari. The 2 frogs make their way into the Louisiana bayou, a world of dark water, Spanish moss, fireflies, and strange nocturnal sounds. It is beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Almost immediately they encounter a large alligator who lunges at them out of the darkness. They panic and flee, but the alligator suddenly stops and reveals that he is not hunting them at all. He is playing his trumpet. The alligator's name is Louis, and he is one of the most lovable characters in the entire film. Louis is huge and toothy and should be terrifying, but he is gentle, emotional, and deeply passionate about jazz music. He has spent years hiding in the reeds of the bayou, watching the jazz bands perform on the riverboats that pass by, teaching himself to play the trumpet, and dreaming of one day being allowed to perform on stage with human musicians. He cannot do that, of course, because he is an enormous alligator and would cause a stampede of terror wherever he went. But the dream persists in him with beautiful stubbornness. When Tiana and Naveen explain their situation to Louis, he offers to help them find Mama Odie, a legendary and powerful voodoo practitioner who lives somewhere deep in the bayou. Louis has heard of her and believes she is the only person capable of breaking a curse as powerful as the one they are under. He agrees to guide them through the swamp. Not long after, they encounter Ray, a small Cajun firefly with an enormous personality. Ray is warm, funny, loyal, and surprisingly wise for a glowing bug. He speaks in a thick Cajun accent and is full of stories and laughter. He is deeply in love with a star he can see shining in the night sky, a star he calls Evangeline. He believes with complete sincerity that Evangeline is another firefly, shining far above him, and that she loves him in return. It is a gentle, sweet delusion, and no one in the group has the heart to tell him the truth, that Evangeline is simply a star and not a firefly at all. Ray immediately agrees to help guide the group to Mama Odie. He knows the bayou intimately and leads them through its winding waterways with confidence and joy. The journey and the growing connection, the journey through the bayou is long and filled with adventure, danger, and unexpected moments of beauty. Along the way, several important things happen that change the inner lives of both Tiana and Naveen. At one point, the group is captured by a family of Cajun frog hunters who intend to use them for frog legs. It is a tense and frightening sequence, and it is during their escape that Naveen begins to show something unexpected, a genuine willingness to put himself at risk for Tiana's sake. He could have escaped and saved himself, but he goes back for her instead. It is the first crack in the armor of his selfishness, and Tiana notices it even if she does not say so. During quieter moments of the journey, Naveen begins to learn things he has never had to learn before. Tiana is a skilled cook, and she shows him how to chop mushrooms and prepare a makeshift meal using what they find in the bayou. It is a simple task, but for Naveen, who has never done anything for himself in his entire life, it is genuinely transformative. He is clumsy and terrible at first, but he keeps trying. And slowly, through these small domestic moments, the two begin to talk to each other differently. Less like two people forced together by bad luck, and more like two people beginning to see each other clearly. Naveen is charming and playful, and beneath his laziness there is actually a warm and joyful person trying to emerge. Tiana is disciplined and serious, but beneath her hard exterior there is a woman who loves to cook, who loves music, who can laugh when she allows herself to. They bring out unexpected things in each other. Naveen reminds Tiana that life has more in it than work, and Tiana shows Naveen that the things you earn through effort mean infinitely more than the things you are simply handed. Romance begins to bloom between them, slowly and almost reluctantly on both sides. Neither of them is ready to admit it, and both of them have reasons to hold back. Naveen is still technically planning to go back and marry Charlotte for her money. That was the whole plan, after all. And Tiana is too focused on her restaurant dream to allow herself to feel anything that might complicate her goals. But the feelings are there, growing quietly in the background of every shared moment. Facelier's Despration back in New Orleans. Things are not going smoothly for Dr. Facelier. The talisman he created to power Lawrence's disguise is running low on Naveen's blood. Without a fresh supply of the prince's blood, the spell holding Lawrence in Naveen's form will break, exposing the deception and destroying the entire plan. Facelier needs to find Naveen quickly. He goes to his altar and calls upon his friends on the other side, the voodoo spirits to whom he owes his great debt. He makes them a promise: if they help him find Naveen and deliver the souls of New Orleans to them, he will pay everything he owes and more. The spirits agree and send him a vast army of shadow demons, dark shapeless figures that can move through walls and water and darkness, hunting for the frog prince. The shadow demons begin spreading through the bayou, searching. The threat becomes very real, very fast, as Tiana and Naveen's group realizes they are being hunted by something supernatural and relentless. Mama Odi. The group finally reaches Mama Odi after surviving the swamp, the hunters, and the shadow demons. Mama Odi is absolutely unlike anything they expected. She is ancient, tiny, blind, and completely wild. She lives in an enormous old boat that has somehow ended up lodged high in the branches of a massive cypress tree deep in the bayou. She has a pet python named Juju whom she uses as a walking stick, and she moves through her unusual home with total confidence despite her blindness, because she sees the world in ways that go far beyond ordinary sight. Mama Odi is the comic heart of the film's second half, but she is also its spiritual center. When Tiana and Naveen arrive and explain their situation, asking her to simply turn them back into humans, Mama Odi refuses to do it so easily. She launches into a vibrant musical number and tries to make them understand something deeper. She asks them not what they want, but what they need. There is a profound difference between the two, and it is at the heart of both characters' journeys. She explains to them through visions and magic that what they truly need is what already exists inside them: the capacity for love, the willingness to be vulnerable, the courage to choose something over ambition and pride. But she also gives them the practical information they need. The spell can only be broken if Naveen kisses a princess. At that very moment in New Orleans, Charlotte LaBeouf has been crowned the Mardi Gras princess for the evening, a ceremonial title, but it counts. The spell requires only that the kiss happen before midnight. While Charlotte still holds her princess title. So the group has a deadline. They must get Naveen back to New Orleans before midnight on Mardi Gras night and have him kiss Charlotte. The clock is ticking. The race back to New Orleans. The group races back toward New Orleans with desperate urgency. The Mardi Gras celebrations are in full swing. The streets are packed with music, dancing, colorful costumes, and the joyful chaos of one of the most famous festivals in the world. But beneath the celebration, Fasilier's shadow demons are closing in. During the journey back, Naveen makes a private decision that costs him enormously. He has fallen completely in love with Tiana. He knows it with total certainty now. But he also knows that kissing Charlotte is the only way for both of them to become human again. And becoming human is what Tiana needs to open her restaurant, to fulfill her father's dream. Her happiness, her whole life's purpose, depends on this working. So Naveen makes the selfless choice. He will kiss Charlotte, marry her for money as originally planned, and use that money to buy Tiana her restaurant. He will give Tiana everything she wants, even though it means he cannot have what he wants, which is her. He pulls Ray aside and tells him this plan quietly, asking Ray to tell Tiana how he feels so she at least knows. Ray listens and understands, and in this moment the little firefly demonstrates a wisdom and emotional depth that belies his tiny size. But before any of this can happen, the shadow demons descend on the group. In a chaotic and terrifying sequence, Naveen is captured and dragged back to Fasilier. Ray manages to steal the talisman from Lawrence, breaking the disguise spell and exposing Lawrence's deception. Lawrence is immediately arrested by the authorities. But Fasilier now has Naveen in his grasp, and without the talisman, his entire scheme is collapsing. Ray, holding the talisman and trying to get it to Tiana, is caught by Fasilier and crushed underfoot. It is one of the most heartbreaking moments in the film. This small, joyful, loving creature who has done nothing but help others is mortally wounded for his bravery. Tiana destroys the talisman and Tiana recovers the talisman. Fasilier appears before her in his most terrifying and manipulative form. He conjures a vision of her father's restaurant. Not just a vision, but an illusion so real that she can almost smell the food and hear the music. He tells her that all she has to do is hand over the talisman, and everything she has ever dreamed of can be hers right now. The restaurant, the success, the legacy she promised her father. For a moment, Tiana is tempted. This is a woman who has worked her entire adult life for this single goal. The promise of it, even in a false form, is enormously powerful. But then she understands something. She looks at the vision of the restaurant and realizes that her father never got to live his dream either. But that did not make his life incomplete. He had love. He had family. He had joy. Those things were the real point. The restaurant was never just a building or a business. It was always about community, warmth, and sharing something good with the people around you. She understands now what Mama Odie was trying to tell her. What she needs is not the same as what she wants. What she needs she already has, in Naveen, in her friends, in the love she has been too afraid to admit. Tiana smashes the talisman on the ground. It shatters completely. With his power source destroyed and his deal with the spirits broken, Facilier is in terrible danger. The spirits on the other side come for him immediately. They drag him, screaming, into their realm, a dark, terrifying, final punishment for a man who made too many promises to too many dangerous forces. His shadow, his constant companion throughout the film, is the last thing consumed. It is one of the darkest villain endings in all of Disney's history, rendered in vivid and frightening imagery. The bittersweet moment, and then the miracle with Facilier gone and Lawrence under arrest. Naveen is freed. He rushes to find Charlotte. Charlotte, who has been watching everything unfold, now understands the full story. She sees that Naveen and Tiana are in love, and she is genuinely moved by it. Charlotte LaBeouf, for all her romantic silliness, has a good heart. She agrees to kiss Naveen to break the curse, asking nothing in return. But it is too late. The clock strikes midnight. Mardi Gras is officially over. Charlotte is no longer the Mardi Gras princess. Her title has expired with the turn of midnight, and so her kiss has no magical power. The curse remains unbroken. Tiana and Naveen are still frogs. Charlotte kisses Naveen anyway, because she is Charlotte, and she never stops hoping, but it does not work. The magic requires what it requires, and the moment has passed. And then comes Ray's final moment. The little firefly, badly injured by Facilier, dies quietly and peacefully. It is gentle and dignified and deeply sad. Tiana and Naveen hold a small and loving funeral for him in the bayou, surrounded by the warm glow of fireflies. And then, in the sky above them, a new star appears beside Evangeline. Ray has become a star himself, shining eternally beside the light he loved. It is one of the most quietly beautiful moments in the entire film. The wedding and the TRNSFORMATIO and Naveen, now certain of what he truly wants and no longer interested in wealth or convenience, proposes to Tiana. Not because it will break any curse. Not for money or strategy. Simply because he loves her and wants to spend his life with her, whatever form that life takes. Even as a frog, if that is what fate has decided. He has grown from a careless, spoiled boy into a man capable of genuine love and genuine sacrifice. The journey through the bayou did for him what years of royal comfort never could. Tiana accepts. She loves him too, and she is no longer afraid to say so. Mama Odie performs the wedding ceremony right there in the bayou, surrounded by Louis, the fireflies, and the warm night air of Louisiana. Tiana and Naveen are married, and in that moment of marriage, the magic shifts. Tiana, by marrying a prince, has become a princess, a real one, in the truest sense. And when she and Naveen share their first kiss as husband and wife, the curse finally, fully, and beautifully breaks. There is an explosion of color and light, and when it clears, both Tiana and Naveen are human again. Standing in the bayou in their human forms, laughing and holding each other. It is a moment of pure joy, not just because the curse is broken, but because everything that happened on the way to this moment was real. The love, the growth, the friendship, the loss. None of it was wasted. The ending. Tiana's dream comes true. Tiana and Naveen return to New Orleans together as husband and wife. They hold a proper wedding celebration in the city, joyful and full of music and dancing and all the warmth of New Orleans at its finest. Charlotte is there, genuinely happy for them, because she is a better person than anyone gave her credit for. And then Tiana does what she has always promised herself she would do. She purchases the old sugar mill. She renovates it with her own hands and with Naveen working beside her. The prince who once could not do anything now learning to work with his hands because he wants to, because it matters, because she matters. Louis finally gets to play his trumpet on stage with a real jazz band, living his dream in the most glorious way possible. The restaurant opens. It is everything Tiana ever imagined and more. It is full of people, full of music, full of the smell of incredible cooking, full of laughter and life. Tiana stands in the middle of it all, wearing her apron, looking around at everything she has built, and she thinks of her father. She knows, with complete certainty, that he would be proud. Not just of the restaurant. Of her. The film ends with a quiet, beautiful image. Tiana and Naveen, human and happy and in love, looking up at the evening star together. The same star her father used to show her. The same star she once wished on in desperation. The star that has been watching over her story all along, and the dream, in full, is finally real. The Princess and the Frog, 2009, complete cultural and historical detailsintroductio, and The Princess and the Frog is not simply an animated fairy tale. It is a film deeply embedded in the culture, history, music, food, and social fabric of a very specific time and place. Every frame of this movie carries the weight of real history, real traditions, and real cultural identity. To truly understand and appreciate this film, you have to understand the world it was built upon, the city of New Orleans, the era of the 1920s, the African American experience in the American South, the tradition of Louisiana voodoo, the legacy of jazz music, and the significance of Disney creating its first ever African American princess. All of these elements come together to make The Princess and the Frog one of the most culturally layered animated films ever produced. The setting, New Orleans, Louisiana. The story is set in New Orleans, Louisiana, and this choice of setting is one of the most important creative decisions the filmmakers made. New Orleans is one of the most historically complex and culturally unique cities in the entire United States. It is a city unlike any other in America, and its distinctiveness comes from the extraordinary mixture of cultures, histories, and traditions that have shaped it over centuries. New Orleans was founded by French colonists in 1718 and was named after Philippe II, Duke of Orleans. It then passed to Spanish control before being acquired by the United States as part of the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Because of this history, the city developed a cultural identity that blends French, Spanish, African, Native American, and later American influences in a way that exists nowhere else in the world. This cultural mixture gave birth to an entirely unique people known as Creoles, individuals of mixed European and African ancestry who developed their own language, cuisine, music, and social customs. The city sits on the Mississippi River Delta, surrounded by swamps, bayous, and wetlands. The bayou environment that features so prominently in the film is completely authentic to Louisiana. Those dark, moss-covered waterways filled with alligators, fireflies, and strange night sounds are a real and defining feature of the Louisiana landscape. The filmmakers studied the bayou extensively and traveled to Louisiana to research the environment and make the animation as accurate as possible. New Orleans is also a city with a deeply complicated racial history. It was one of the most significant centers of the American slave trade, and after the Civil War, it became a city where African American communities navigated the brutal realities of segregation, poverty, and institutionalized discrimination while simultaneously producing some of the most extraordinary art, music, and culture in American history. This contradiction, beauty and suffering existing side by side, is built into the soul of the city, and the film, set in the 1920s, exists directly within that tension. The 1920s. The historical context. The film is set specifically in the 1920s, which is a historically crucial period in American history, particularly for African Americans. This decade is often called the Roaring Twenties, a time of economic prosperity, social change, and cultural explosion. But the experience of the Roaring Twenties was not the same for everyone, and for African Americans living in the South, it was a period of profound contradiction. The 1920s in the American South was the era of Jim Crow laws. These were a set of state and local laws that enforced racial segregation across virtually every aspect of public life: schools, restaurants, transportation, hotels, hospitals, and more. Under Jim Crow, Black Americans were legally separated from white Americans and treated as second-class citizens. Violence against Black communities was common, and the legal system offered little to no protection. In New Orleans specifically, the racial hierarchy was complex and layered. Creole communities occupied a middle space in the social structure, and African Americans of different backgrounds experienced the city's racial politics in different ways. But the fundamental reality of segregation and discrimination was present throughout. The film addresses this reality with some subtlety. When Tiana attempts to purchase the old sugar mill, the real estate developers, who are white men, tell her that a young woman of her background needs to be realistic about her prospects. This is not simply about her being a woman. It is about race. The film does not spell it out in graphic detail, but the implication is clear for any viewer who understands the historical context. A young Black woman in 1920s New Orleans trying to purchase commercial property and open a business was facing not just financial obstacles but systemic racial barriers as well. The fact that Tiana is working 2 jobs and still barely managing to save enough money while white characters like Charlotte live in luxury is not accidental. It is a reflection of the real economic inequality that structured American society in that era, with race as its primary organizing principle. Disney's first African American princess, the cultural significance, perhaps the single most culturally significant thing about The Princess and the Frog is that Tiana is Disney's first African American princess. This is not a small thing. It is an enormous cultural milestone that carried enormous weight when the film was released in 2009 and continues to carry that weight today. Disney's princess franchise began in 1937 with Snow White, who was white. For the next several decades, every Disney princess was white and European. Cinderella in 1950, Sleeping Beauty in 1959, Ariel in 1989, Belle in 1991, and others, all white and rooted in European fairy tale traditions. The first non-white Disney princess was Jasmine from Aladdin in 1992, who was Middle Eastern. Pocahontas followed in 1995, representing a Native American woman. Mulan in 1998 represented a Chinese woman. But there was no Black Disney princess for over 70 years of the studio's history. The announcement that Disney's next princess would be an African American woman set in New Orleans was met with enormous excitement in many communities, particularly among Black families who had spent generations watching Disney films in which they did not see themselves reflected. For Black parents, the prospect of being able to show their daughters a Disney princess who looked like them was deeply meaningful. For Black children, seeing a princess with their own skin tone and cultural background represented a kind of validation and representation that the medium had never offered them before. The creative team worked with cultural consultants and representatives from the African American community throughout the production process to ensure that Tiana and her world were portrayed with authenticity, dignity, and respect. The filmmakers traveled to New Orleans and immersed themselves in the culture of the city, attending jazz festivals, studying the food traditions, learning about the history, and consulting with local residents and historians. However, the film was not without controversy on this front. Some critics argued that despite being the first Black Disney princess, Tiana spends a large portion of the film as a frog rather than in her human form, which they felt diminished the visual representation the film was supposed to provide. Others raised concerns about the film's portrayal of voodoo, and whether the use of a Black villain practicing dark magic reinforced negative stereotypes. These critiques were engaged with seriously by both Disney and cultural commentators, and they form an important part of the ongoing conversation about representation in mainstream entertainment. Louisiana Voodoo, cultural and religious context. Louisiana Voodoo, also known as New Orleans Voodoo, is one of the most misunderstood and misrepresented religious and cultural traditions in American history, and it plays a central role in The Princess and the Frog. Understanding what Louisiana Voodoo actually is, and how the film both draws from it and departs from it, is essential to understanding the film's cultural dimension. Louisiana Voodoo developed in New Orleans as a synthesis of several different spiritual traditions. Its roots lie in the West African religious practices brought to the Americas by enslaved people, particularly from the Fan and Yu peoples of what is now the Republic of Benin. These African spiritual traditions were then mixed with elements of French and Spanish Catholicism, Native American spiritual practices, and other influences to create something entirely unique to Louisiana. In its authentic form, Louisiana Voodoo is a religion and spiritual practice that honors ancestors, works with spirits known as Loa or Loas, uses ritual objects, and seeks healing and guidance through spiritual means. It is a living tradition practiced by real people, and it is not inherently dark or evil. Like any religious tradition, it has its own ethics, its own community practices, and its own relationship to the sacred. The film uses voodoo as a central plot device through the character of Dr. Facilier, who practices a dark and destructive form of magic in exchange for power. Mama Od, on the other hand, represents a more benevolent and wisdom-based form of spiritual practice. By presenting both a villainous and a benevolent voodoo practitioner, the film attempts to avoid reducing the tradition to pure evil. Mama Od is wise, helpful, and deeply connected to a kind of spiritual truth, while Facilier is corrupted by greed and his willingness to make dark bargains. However, some scholars and practitioners of Louisiana Voodoo have pointed out that even the film's more nuanced portrayal still leans heavily on Hollywood stereotypes, shadow demons, voodoo dolls used for harm, and the general association of the practice with darkness and danger. These elements are not accurate representations of Louisiana Voodoo as it is actually practiced, and they perpetuate misconceptions that real practitioners of the tradition have spent years trying to correct. The film's use of voodoo was a deliberate creative choice to root the story in the specific spiritual geography of New Orleans, and there is genuine cultural authenticity in certain details. The altar arrangements, the visual language of the spiritual world, and the recognition that New Orleans has a rich and complex spiritual tradition that is distinctly its own. but the tension between entertainment and accurate representation remains a meaningful part of the film's cultural legacy. Jazz music. The soul of New Orleans jazz music is not simply the soundtrack of The Princess and the Frog. It is the cultural heartbeat of the entire film. Jazz is one of America's greatest original art forms, and it was born in New Orleans in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Understanding the history of jazz is essential to understanding what the film is celebrating. Jazz emerged from the African American communities of New Orleans, growing out of a combination of blues, ragtime, spirituals, and the musical traditions brought from Africa by enslaved people. It was music born from both suffering and joy, from the experience of a people who used creativity as a form of survival, expression, and resistance. The improvisational nature of jazz, its freedom, its spontaneity, its conversation between musicians, reflected a spirit of liberation that resonated deeply with the African American experience. New Orleans in the 1920s was one of the jazz capitals of the world. The streets of the French Quarter and the neighborhoods surrounding them were alive with the sound of trumpets, trombones, clarinets, and pianos. Jazz clubs, dance halls, and street performances were everywhere. It was a musical culture of extraordinary vitality and creativity, and it was producing some of the greatest musicians in history. The film honors this tradition through Louis the Alligator, whose entire character arc is about the transformative power of jazz music and the dream of being allowed to share your gift with the world. Louis teaches himself to play the trumpet by watching the jazz bands from the reeds of the bayou, and his longing to perform on stage with human musicians mirrors the real historical story of jazz musicians who were denied stages and venues because of racial segregation, but who kept playing anyway because the music was too powerful to be silenced. Randy Newman, who composed the film's score and songs, is himself deeply connected to the New Orleans musical tradition. His family has roots in New Orleans, and his understanding of the city's musical culture gave the film's soundtrack an authenticity that goes beyond simple stylistic imitation. The songs in the film draw on jazz, blues, zydeco, gospel, and Cajun musical traditions, creating a soundscape that is genuinely rooted in the cultural world of Louisiana. Cajun culture and the bayou community. The character of Ray the Firefly introduces another distinct cultural dimension to the film: Cajun culture. The Cajun people are a unique ethnic group descended from French-speaking Acadian settlers who were expelled from what is now Nova Scotia, Canada, by the British in the mid-18th century in an event known as the Grand Derangement. These displaced people eventually settled in the swamps and bayous of Louisiana, where they developed their own distinct culture, cuisine, music, and dialect of French. Ray speaks in a thick Cajun accent and embodies the warmth, storytelling tradition, and love of music that characterize Cajun culture. His devotion to Evangeline, his star, mirrors the romantic sensibility of Cajun folk traditions, which are full of songs and stories about longing, love, and the beauty of the natural world. Zydeco music, which is a form of Cajun folk music with African and blues influences, is referenced in the film's musical palette. The bayou environment itself is central to Cajun cultural identity. The swamps and wetlands of Louisiana are not threatening or sinister to the Cajun people. They are home. They are a place of fishing, trapping, storytelling, and community. The film captures this relationship between the Cajun people and their landscape through Ray and through the visual beauty of the bayou sequences. Food culture. The cuisine of New Orleans food is one of the most important cultural elements in The Princess and the Frog, and this is entirely appropriate because New Orleans has one of the most distinctive and celebrated food cultures in the entire world. The cuisine of New Orleans is itself a product of the same cultural mixing that defines the city. It draws on French, Spanish, African, Native American, and Creole traditions to create dishes that are found nowhere else. Tiana is defined by her cooking. Her relationship with food is her primary form of love and connection. She cooks the way her father cooked, and her restaurant dream is fundamentally about sharing that love with her community. The specific foods referenced in the film are deeply authentic to New Orleans culture. Beignets, which Tiana makes for the La Bouffe Masquerade Ball, are a classic New Orleans pastry, square pieces of fried dough covered in powdered sugar, traditionally served at the famous Café du Monde in the French Quarter. They are as much a symbol of New Orleans as the jazz music or the Mardi Gras beads. Gumbo, which Tiana and her father cooked together in the early scenes of the film, is perhaps the most iconic dish of Louisiana Creole cuisine. It is a thick, rich stew with West African, French, and Native American culinary roots, a dish that is itself a metaphor for the cultural blending that created New Orleans. The okra used to thicken gumbo comes from West Africa, the roux technique comes from French cuisine, and the fowl powder used as a seasoning comes from the Choctaw Native American tradition. The restaurant Tiana ultimately opens is called Tiana's Palace, and the film makes clear that it will be a place rooted in the food traditions of New Orleans. A celebration of the city's culinary heritage and a gathering place for its community. Mardi Gras, the cultural festival. The climax of the film takes place during Mardi Gras, which is one of the most famous festivals in the world and one of New Orleans' most defining cultural traditions. Mardi Gras, which means Fat Tuesday in French, is the celebration that precedes the Christian season of Lent. It is a time of feasting, music, dancing, elaborate costumes, and street parades. In New Orleans, Mardi Gras has developed into an extraordinarily elaborate and uniquely local festival over several centuries. The tradition of Mardi Gras in New Orleans dates back to the French colonial period, and over the centuries it absorbed African, Creole, and other cultural influences to become the spectacular celebration it is today. The festival is organized around crews, which are social organizations that host balls and parades. Parade floats are decorated with tremendous creativity, and participants throw colorful beads and trinkets to the crowds lining the streets. The fact that the film's climax takes place during Mardi Gras is culturally very deliberate. Mardi Gras is about transformation, carnival, the blurring of identity through costumes and masks, and the coming together of a whole community in shared celebration. These themes mirror the transformation at the heart of the story, characters becoming different versions of themselves, identities being concealed and then revealed, and a community ultimately coming together in joy. The Brothers Grimm and fairy tale tradition. The film is rooted in the European fairy tale tradition through its adaptation of the Brothers Grimm story The Frog Prince, originally collected and published in 1812. The Brothers Grimm, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, were German scholars who traveled throughout Germany and collected oral folk tales from the local population. Their collection, known as Grimm's Fairy Tales, became one of the most influential books in the history of literature and has shaped the way the Western world tells and understands stories about magic, transformation, and morality. The original Frog Prince story is about a princess who drops her golden ball into a well, and a frog retrieves it for her in exchange for the promise of her companionship. When the frog arrives at the palace to claim his reward, the princess is reluctant, but her father the king insists she honor her promise. In the original Grimm version, the spell is broken not by a kiss but by the princess throwing the frog against the wall in frustration. In later adapted versions, the kiss became the standard form of the spell's resolution. Disney took this basic framework and transplanted it into the specific cultural world of 1920s New Orleans, reversing the gender dynamic by making the main character the woman who is turned into a frog rather than the prince, and rooting the magical element in Louisiana voodoo rather than the generic European magic of the original tale. This was a creative decision that grounded the universal fairy tale in a specific and historically real cultural context. Disney Animation History. The Return to Hand-Drawn Tio and the Princess and the Frog holds a very specific and important place in the history of Disney animation. By 2009, the studio had been making computer-generated animated films for several years, following the enormous commercial success of Pixar films and the industry-wide shift towards CGI. The last traditionally animated Disney feature had been Home on the Range in 2004, which had underperformed commercially and was seen as evidence that hand-drawn animation was no longer viable in the marketplace. The decision to return to traditional animation with The Princess and the Frog was therefore both a creative and a cultural statement. It was an assertion that hand-drawn animation, the art form that defined Disney for over 70 years and produced some of the greatest animated films in history, still had value, still had beauty, and still had the power to connect with audiences. The film consciously drew on the visual and musical style of the Disney Renaissance, the period from 1989 to 1999 that produced The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. By bringing back directors John Musker and Ron Clements, who had been central to the Renaissance, and by returning to the Broadway musical format with an original score, Disney was acknowledging its own history and attempting to reconnect with the artistic tradition that had defined its greatest period. The animation style of the film specifically references the lush, detailed hand-drawn work of that golden era. With warm colors, expressive character design, and fluid movement that CGI simply cannot replicate in the same way. Every frame was drawn by hand, by human animators working with traditional tools, pencils, paper, and ink, and the result has a warmth and imperfection that is itself a form of cultural authenticity. The significance of Tiana's father and the DRAM. One of the most historically and culturally resonant elements of the film is the figure of Tiana's father James and the meaning of his unfulfilled dream. James is clearly a World War I veteran. The timeline of the film suggests he served and likely died during or after the war. The history of African American soldiers in World War I is one of the most powerful and painful stories in American history. Hundreds of thousands of black men served in the United States military during World War I, fighting for a country that denied them basic rights at home. They served in segregated units, were given inferior equipment and training, and were largely excluded from the recognition and honor given to white veterans when they returned. Many black veterans who came home from the war found that nothing had changed. They returned to segregation, discrimination, and violence, having sacrificed for a freedom they were not permitted to enjoy. James's dream of opening a restaurant, then, is not just a personal ambition. It is a deeply American story about a black man who worked hard, served his country, and still could not fully access the opportunities that the American dream was supposed to offer. His inability to fulfill his dream before his death is a reflection of the systemic barriers that made black economic advancement extraordinarily difficult in the Jim Crow South. And Tiana's determination to fulfill that dream is her way of honoring not just her father but the generation of black Americans who deserved more than they were given. The Princess and the Frog is a film built on layers of real cultural and historical material. It honors the music of New Orleans and the African American musicians who created jazz. It reflects the reality of life for black Americans in the segregated South of the 1920s. It engages with the genuine spiritual traditions of Louisiana voodoo, however imperfectly. It celebrates the food culture of Creole New Orleans as a form of cultural identity and community love. It marks a historic moment in the representation of black women in mainstream popular culture. And it does all of this while telling a timeless story about hard work, love, growth, and the difference between what we want and what we truly need. This film is not just entertainment. It is a cultural document. And that is exactly what makes it one of the most important animated films Disney has ever made. Bruno Campos, voice of Prince Naveen. Bruno Campos is a Brazilian-born actor whose multicultural background and international life story gave him a uniquely cosmopolitan quality that made him perfect for the role of the worldly Prince Naveen. He was born on December 3, 1973, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. His father Paulo was an international banker, and his mother Thania was an actress, a detail that proved significant given that Bruno eventually pursued the same profession. Because of his father's career in international banking, the family moved frequently, and Bruno grew up across multiple countries and cultures. His childhood was spent in Brazil, Toronto in Canada, Bahrain in the Middle East, and Houston in the United States, an extraordinary range of places for any child to call home. When Bruno was approximately 5 years old, the family left Brazil. By age 9, he was attending a private arts school in Toronto, Canada, where he first began acting. At age 13, he played Prince Charming in a school production of Cinderella, a role that, in retrospect, perfectly foreshadowed his future as a Disney prince. When the family eventually returned to Brazil, Bruno convinced his father to allow him to stay in the United States to continue his education. By this point, he could barely speak Portuguese and felt more American than Brazilian, making the decision to remain a natural one. At age 17, Bruno was accepted to the prestigious Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan, one of the finest arts boarding schools in the world. After Interlochen, he went on to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, where he earned a bachelor's degree in theater in 1995. Northwestern's theater program is highly respected, and Campos graduated with a strong academic and practical foundation. Following graduation, he returned to Brazil and immediately landed a lead role in the Brazilian film O Quatrilho, a story about Italian immigrants in Brazil that went on to receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Foreign Language Film. It was a remarkable debut for a young actor, and it gave him immediate credibility in the film world. He then moved to Los Angeles to pursue an American acting career. Within 8 months of arriving in Los Angeles, just short of the deadline imposed by U.S. immigration laws before he would have been required to return to Brazil, Campos landed a development deal with Warner Brothers Television. This perfectly timed breakthrough allowed him to remain in the United States and launched his Hollywood career. He became known to American television audiences through his role as Diego on the NBC sitcom Jessie starring Christina Applegate, and later as attorney Joe Rivera in the Showtime series Leap Years. He also made recurring guest appearances as Dr. Eddie Dorset on the long-running medical drama ER. In 2004, Campos joined the cast of Nibs/Tuck on FX as recurring character Dr. Quentin Costa, a plastic surgeon. In 2005, he became a full-time regular cast member. The role brought him his most significant American exposure and earned him a dedicated following. In 1999, TV Guide placed him on their list of the 16 sexiest stars on television. His most beloved role came in 2009 when he voiced Prince Naveen in The Princess and the Frog, bringing the charming, carefree, and ultimately emotionally complex Meldonian prince to life. In a fascinating and unexpected turn, Campos later stepped away from acting entirely to pursue a second career. He enrolled at the University of Michigan Law School and earned his law degree in 2013. He passed the New York bar exam and became a practicing lawyer, working on complex insurance litigation. He has been associated with the law firm Covington and Burling. He married a psychologist named Karina in 2000, and the couple have 2 children together. Keith David, voice of Dr. Facilar. Keith David is one of the most respected and recognizable voices in American entertainment, a man whose deep, commanding presence has made him one of the most sought-after actors in both film and voice work for over 4 decades. He was born Keith David Williams on June 4, 1956, in Harlem, New York City. He grew up in the Corona neighborhood of Queens, New York. His path to acting began at a young age, when he was cast as the Cowardly Lion in a school production of The Wizard of Oz at approximately 9 years old. The experience of performing in front of an audience and feeling the response of the crowd ignited something in him that never left. David attended the Manhattan High School of Performing Arts, one of the most prestigious and competitive arts high schools in New York City, the school that inspired the film and television series fame. After high school, he was accepted into the Juilliard School's drama division, graduating in 1979 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. Juilliard is widely considered the finest drama training institution in the United States, and its graduates form an elite group of American performing artists. David's training there gave him a classical foundation in theater that would inform everything he did for the rest of his career. After Juilliard, David toured the country with John Houseman's The Acting Company in productions of A Midsummer Night's Dream and Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. In 1980, he made his Broadway debut in The Lady from Dubuque. His film career began in earnest in 1982 when he was cast as Childs in John Carpenter's legendary science fiction horror film The Thing, opposite Kurt Russell. It was a breakthrough role that immediately established his screen presence. He went on to appear in some of the most important American films of the 1980s and 1990s. His role as King in Oliver Stone's Vietnam War epic Platoon in 1986 remains one of the most celebrated performances of that film. During the filming of Platoon, David famously saved the life of co-star Charlie Sheen. When the helicopter they were riding in banked sharply and Sheen was nearly thrown through the open door, David grabbed him by the back and pulled him to safety. Other major film roles included Frank in John Carpenter's cult classic They Live in 1988, and significant appearances in Dead Presidents, Clockers, Volcano. There's Something About Mary, Pitch Black, The Chronicles of Riddick, Requiem for a Dream, Barbershop, Crash, and many more. Alongside his film career, David also built an extraordinary parallel career as a voice actor and narrator. He voiced the iconic character Goliath in the Disney animated series Gargoyles from 1994 to 1997. He became one of the most prominent narrators in American documentary filmmaking, collaborating extensively with legendary filmmaker Ken Burns on projects including Jazz, The War, Unforgivable Blackness, Jackie Robinson, and Muhammad Ali. He narrated the History Channel's The Bible series in 2013. His voice has also been used in numerous video games, including the Mass Effect series, Fallout, Saints Row, and Halo. In 1992, David received a Tony Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor in a Musical for his performance in Jelly's Last Jam on Broadway, demonstrating the full range of his theatrical abilities. His role as Dr. Facilier in The Princess and the Frog showcased his ability to create a villain of genuine menace and theatrical grandeur, one of the most celebrated Disney villains of the modern era. He also voices the President of the United States in the adult animated series Rick and Morty. Oprah Winfrey, voice of EUDR. Few people in the history of American media have had the cultural impact of Oprah Winfrey. Her involvement in The Princess and the Frog as the voice of Tiana's mother Eudora carried a symbolic weight that went far beyond the role itself. Oprah Gail Winfrey was born on January 29, 1954, on a rural farm in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Her birth was not planned, and her parents, Vernon Winfrey, who was serving in the armed forces, and Renita Lee, a teenage girl, were young, unmarried, and unprepared for parenthood. Her name was meant to be Orpah, taken from the Book of Ruth in the Bible, but a misspelling on her birth certificate gave her the name Oprah, and that is what she was called from that point forward. Her earliest years were spent with her maternal grandmother on the farm in Mississippi. The grandmother was a disciplined, religious, and enormously influential woman who taught Oprah to read at the age of 2.5 years old. This early intellectual development would prove to be one of the defining advantages of Oprah's life. When she was 6 years old, her mother Vernita brought her to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Vernita was trying to build a life for herself. But the circumstances in Milwaukee were difficult, and Oprah's childhood there was marked by poverty, instability, and trauma. As a young teenager, Oprah suffered repeated sexual abuse at the hands of multiple men who were trusted by members of her family. This abuse began when she was 9 years old and continued for several years. At age 14, she gave birth to a baby boy who was born 2 months premature and died after 2 weeks. These experiences of devastating trauma became, over the decades, central to Oprah's public identity as someone who had survived extraordinary hardship and emerged with strength and purpose. Her mother, unable to manage her, sent her to Nashville, Tennessee, to live with her father Vernon Winfrey. Vernon proved to be the stabilizing, positive influence she desperately needed. He was strict and demanding about education, insisting that Oprah read and report on books regularly, and he created a structured, safe environment for her. Oprah flourished under his guidance. She won an oratory competition that earned her a full scholarship to Tennessee State University. At Tennessee State, she studied communications and began her broadcasting career at WVOL Radio in Nashville while still in high school. At age 19, she became a news anchor for the local CBS television station. In 1976, she was made a reporter and co-anchor for the ABC News affiliate in Baltimore, Maryland. Her natural warmth and ability to connect with people were immediately evident on television, and her career began to accelerate. In 1984, she moved to Chicago to host a morning television talk show called AM Chicago. Within 1 month of her taking over as host, the show went from last place in the ratings to first. Within a year it was expanded and renamed The Oprah Winfrey Show. The show was nationally syndicated in 1986 and went on to run for 25 years, finally ending in 2011. It became the highest-rated talk show in television history and earned Oprah the title of Queen of All Media. The Oprah Winfrey Show was not simply entertainment. It was a cultural force. Oprah used her platform to address sexual abuse, addiction, mental health, racial inequality, and numerous other social issues with a frankness and humanity that had never been seen in daytime television. She interviewed virtually every significant public figure of the last 3 decades, and her book club recommendations had the power to turn unknown novels into bestsellers overnight. Oprah also built a media empire. She founded Harpo Productions, Harpo being Oprah spelled backwards, which produced films, television series, and her magazine The Oprah Magazine. She launched the Oprah Winfrey Network, known as OWN, in 2008. She has been recognized as one of the most philanthropic celebrities in American history, donating hundreds of millions of dollars to education, disaster relief, and social causes. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama in 2013. Her voice role as Eudora in The Princess and the Frog was a deeply meaningful one, a Black mother whose love and support shaped the life of Disney's first African-American princess. John Goodman, voice of Big Daddy LaBeouf. John Goodman is one of the most beloved and versatile actors in American entertainment, a man whose extraordinary range, warmth, and natural charisma have made him a fixture of film and television for over 4 decades. John Stephen Goodman was born on June 20, 1952, in Afton, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. His father Leslie Francis Goodman was a postal worker, and his mother Virginia was a waitress and saleswoman. When John was only 2 years old, his father died of a heart attack, leaving Virginia to raise John and his siblings entirely on her own. Growing up without a father in a modest household shaped Goodman's deep appreciation for work, family, and the ordinary human experiences that would later define so many of his most memorable roles. After high school, Goodman discovered two passions: football and theater. He excelled at both. After graduating in 1970, he won a football scholarship to Southwest Missouri State University. He spent his first year focused on both football and socializing, but an injury during his college football career ended his hopes of a professional sports future. This pivotal moment forced a rethinking of his entire direction, and he made the courageous decision to change his major to drama. Under the guidance of notable instructors and alongside fellow students including future stars like Kathleen Turner and Tess Harper, Goodman discovered that acting was his true calling. He graduated with his theater degree in 1975 and immediately made the move to New York City to pursue acting professionally. Taking out a loan from his brother to cover the cost of a small apartment near the theater district in Manhattan. Life in New York was difficult in those early years. He worked as a bartender and took any acting job he could find, appearing in tiny dinner theater productions and television commercials. One of his earliest commercial appearances was for McDonald's, alongside actress Megan Mullally. Slowly but steadily, he built his career. He began appearing at the Public Theater in New York, where he performed in productions including Henry IV Part 1. In 1985, he made his Broadway debut in the musical Big River, for which he received a Drama Desk Award nomination. That same year, he was cast in his first substantial film role in the David Byrne comedy True Stories. His film career accelerated significantly when he was cast in the Coen brothers' dark comedy Raising Arizona in 1987, playing an escaped convict opposite Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter. It was a showcase for his ability to be simultaneously menacing and hilarious, and the Coen brothers were so impressed that they became long-term collaborators. Then came the role that made him a household name across America. In 1988, Goodman was cast as Dan Connor, the working-class family patriarch, in the ABC sitcom Roseanne. The show ran from 1988 to 1997 and became one of the most watched television programs in the United States. Goodman's portrayal of Dan Connor was so authentic, so warm, and so genuinely funny that he earned numerous Emmy nominations and won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Television Series in 1993. Throughout the run of Roseanne, Goodman continued building an extraordinary film career. His collaborations with the Coen brothers produced some of the most celebrated films of their era: Barton Fink in 1991, The Big Lebowski in 1998, Oh Brother Where Art Thou in 2000, and Inside Llewyn Davis in 2013. He also starred in The Babe in 1992, playing Babe Ruth, and in The Flintstones in 1994 as Fred Flintstone. In animation, Goodman became particularly beloved for his voice work with Disney and Pixar. He voiced Sully in Monsters Incorporated in 2001, and reprised the role in Monsters University in 2013. His distinctive voice and warmth made him a natural for animated family films, and his role as Big Daddy LaBeouf in The Princess and the Frog was a perfect fit for his large, generous, lovable screen personality. He also appeared in the Oscar-winning drama Argo in 2012. Roseanne was revived in 2018 and Goodman returned as Dan Connor. When the show was later rebranded as The Connors following controversy, Goodman stayed on and remained a central part of the cast for years. Jim Cummings, voice of Ray the Firefly. Jim Cummings is simply one of the greatest voice actors in the history of animation. His career spans over 40 years and encompasses more than 400 distinct roles, an almost incomprehensible body of work that has shaped the sound of animated storytelling for generations. James Jonah Cummings was born on November 3, 1952, in Youngstown, Ohio. His early years in Ohio were unremarkable by conventional standards, but after high school he made a move that would prove unexpectedly significant to his eventual career. He relocated to New Orleans, Louisiana. In New Orleans, Jim Cummings lived a varied and colorful life before finding his calling. He worked as a designer and painter of Mardi Gras floats, bringing the elaborate visual spectacle of Mardi Gras to life with his hands. He worked as a deckhand on Louisiana riverboats, experiencing the bayou landscape and waterways that would decades later form the setting for his voice work as Ray in The Princess and the Frog. He worked as a door-to-door salesman. He sang and played drums in a regionally successful rock band called Fusion. This period in New Orleans was not simply a chapter of wandering. It was an immersion in Southern culture, jazz music, Cajun traditions, and the world of the bayou that gave Cummings a lived, experiential connection to the very world he would eventually animate with his voice. When he was cast as Ray, the Cajun firefly from the Louisiana bayou, he was drawing on a genuine cultural and personal familiarity with that world that no amount of research could replicate. After New Orleans, Cummings moved to Anaheim, California, where he managed a video store in the early 1980s while trying to break into the entertainment industry. His first professional voice acting role came in 1984 when he was cast as Leonel the Lion in the Disney series Dumbo's Circus, a live-action and puppet show based on the classic Disney film. This foot in the door at Disney proved to be the beginning of an extraordinary partnership. His earliest work at Disney set the stage for what would become one of the most iconic casting decisions in animation history. In 1988, Cummings was asked to replace Sterling Holloway as the official voice of Winnie the Pooh. His impression of Holloway's gentle, soft, thoughtful voice was so accurate and so filled with warmth that Disney made it official. Jim Cummings has been the voice of Winnie the Pooh ever since, a tenure that now spans nearly 40 years. The following year, in 1989, he also took over as the voice of Tigger, the bouncy, energetic, irresistible tiger from the 100-Acre Wood. These two roles alone would be sufficient to cement a legacy. But Cummings did not stop there. In 1991 he became the voice of Pete, the classic Disney villain who has appeared in Mickey Mouse cartoons since 1928. In 1991 and 1992 he voiced the title character of Darkwing Duck, the beloved Disney afternoon superhero cartoon. He voiced Fat Cat and Monterey Jack in Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. He voiced Dr. Robotnik in the Sonic the Hedgehog animated series. Beyond Disney, his voice work has been staggering in its variety. He has appeared in hundreds of video games, including the legendary Baldur's Gate series where he voiced the beloved character Minsk, as well as Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Fallout 4, Call of Duty, and many others. He has provided additional voices and character fills in countless productions, appearing in credits for films as small secondary characters so frequently that he has become essentially omnipresent in animated entertainment. His performance in The Princess and the Frog as Ray the Firefly was deeply personal in a way he may not have fully articulated but certainly felt. The Cajun accent, the bayou setting, the jazz culture of New Orleans were all things he had experienced directly during his years living in Louisiana. He brought an authenticity to Ray that elevated the character from a simple comic sidekick to one of the most emotionally resonant figures in the entire film. Michael Leon Woolley, voice of Louis the Alligator. Michael Leon Woolley is a man whose life has been defined by music and performance since before he was old enough to know what either word meant, and his rich bass voice made him the perfect choice to voice the jazz-loving alligator Louis. He was born on March 29, 1971, in Fairfax, Virginia, to George and Winnie Woolley. He has a twin brother named Marcus Leon and a younger brother named George Jr. The family eventually settled in Bowie, Maryland, where Michael Leon grew up. From an extraordinarily young age, just 5 years old, he began playing the piano. His musical gift was immediately apparent, and for many years he was entirely focused on becoming a classical concert pianist. His relationship with performance transformed during high school when he took part in a school production of the musical Oklahoma. The experience of performing in front of an audience, combining his musical abilities with acting and physical presence, opened an entirely new dimension of his artistry. He fell completely in love with theater, and never looked back at the concert hall path he had been pursuing. At age 16, he was offered the opportunity to study piano at the renowned Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., one of the finest arts high schools in the country. He turned it down, not to abandon music, but to pursue the full combination of acting, singing, and performance that he now knew was his true calling. At age 18, he competed in a nationwide scholarship competition and was awarded one of 21 full scholarships to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York City, a prestigious institution for training in musical theater. He began his professional career in the national tour of Pearly before working as a singing waiter on the Spirit of New York, a dinner cruise ship that circles Manhattan. An experience that gave him performance experience in front of live audiences in a uniquely intimate setting. In 1992, he made his Broadway debut as an understudy in Five Guys Named Mo, the musical created by Clark Peters. He then embarked on national tours with the Pointer Sisters in Ain't Misbehavin', and with Stephanie Mills in The Wiz. He returned to Broadway in 2000 as Olin Britt in the revival of The Music Man. In 2003, he gave what critics called one of the most powerful voice performances on Broadway when he voiced the man-eating plant Audrey II in the revival of Little Shop of Horrors. Ben Brantley of the New York Times wrote that Woolley possessed a soulful bass voice, and the New York Post praised his performance as rounding out one of the best casts on Broadway. In 2004, he made his debut at Carnegie Hall with the New York Pops. Before The Princess and the Frog, Woolley also appeared in the film Dreamgirls in 2006 as Tiny Joe Dixon, connecting him with several of his future co-stars in that film, including Anika Noni Rose. His role as Louis the Alligator in The Princess and the Frog allowed him to combine his deep singing voice with comedic timing and genuine warmth to create one of the most memorable supporting characters in the film. Terrence Howard, voice of James, Tiana's father. Terrence Howard is one of the most critically respected actors of his generation, known for his emotional depth and his ability to bring profound humanity to every role he plays. Terrence Deshawn Howard was born on March 11, 1969, in Chicago, Illinois, to Anita Janine Williams and Tyrone Howard. He was raised in Cleveland, Ohio. His family history has a violent and tragic thread that shaped him from early childhood. When Terrence was just 2 years old, his father was involved in a fatal altercation on Christmas Day 1971 that resulted in a man's death. His father was convicted and served time in prison. This early absence of his father, and the circumstances surrounding it, left a profound mark on Terrence's emotional development. He enrolled at Pratt Institute in New York City to study chemical engineering, but after 2 years he left to pursue acting. His first significant break came with a guest role on The Cosby Show. From there he built his television resume through appearances in Family Matters, The Jacksons, An American Dream, Coach, and Picket Fences. His transition to film began with smaller roles and steadily grew. His breakthrough came with Mr. Holland's Opus in 1995, followed by a string of increasingly significant film roles: Sunset Park, The Best Man, Big Mama's House with Martin Lawrence, and Angel Eyes with Jennifer Lopez. His role in the 2004 film Ray alongside Jamie Foxx further elevated his profile. His career reached its greatest heights in 2005. He starred in the critically acclaimed film Hustle and Flow as DJ, a Memphis pimp who dreams of becoming a rap musician. The role earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, one of the most significant nominations given to a black actor in recent memory. That same year he appeared in the ensemble drama Crash, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture. In 2008, he starred as James Rhodes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe film Iron Man. He later starred for multiple seasons as Lucius Lyon in the hit Fox television drama Empire, a role that brought him enormous mainstream recognition. His voice role as James in The Princess and the Frog, though relatively brief in screen time, carries some of the film's most emotional weight. James is the heart of the entire story, the father whose dream drives everything that follows, and Howard brought to that role the deep emotional reserves of a man who understood, from his own life, what it meant for a father's absence to shape a child's entire future. Every actor who lent their voice to The Princess and the Frog brought something irreplaceable to the film. Anika Noni Rose brought a lifetime of artistic training and cultural pride. Bruno Campos brought the cosmopolitan charm of a man who had genuinely lived across the world. Keith David brought the trained power of a Juilliard graduate and one of cinema's most commanding presences. Oprah Winfrey brought the authority and warmth of the most influential media personality of her generation. John Goodman brought the generosity and grounded humanity of an actor who spent decades playing ordinary men with extraordinary hearts. Jim Cummings brought the actual lived experience of the New Orleans bayou world he was animating. Michael Leon Woolley brought the voice of a lifelong musical theater performer shaped by the best stages in America. And Terrence Howard brought the emotional truth of a man who understood deeply what it meant to carry the weight of a father's unfinished story. Together, they created something that was far more than animation. They created a world.